Hey guys and girls, Board now back with you for another of the monthly recaps, or what we've been watching this month thingy, as I like to call them. My guest this month for April is Lady Sasha from the What Did I Just Watch channel. Hey, how's it going?
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yep, second time around, so becoming a bit of a pro of this. So you guys know how it works by now. We talk about what we've been watching in the world of films and TV, and hopefully you guys will let us know what you've been watching in the chat as well.
With Immaculate, because that was a surprise for me. I didn't expect it to be as good as it was because of the trailer, and also because I've seen so many non-horror movies that are not so great. So I kind of went in not expecting it to be a good movie, but I was very surprised with Sydney Sweeney. I thought that her acting was pretty good, especially since a lot of people kind of sell her short as just being the pretty girl, but she's also a really good actress. I enjoyed her in this. I liked the ending a lot. I was not I didn't know that there was going to be any gore in it, because the way the trailer was presented, it kind of came as a shock, which I think it was more effective that way. So I would definitely say, if you like a slow burn that has a little bit of gore in it, but also is very atmospheric, I would definitely recommend Immaculate.
Okay. Yeah, it's one I haven't got to yet. It sort of was on the radar, and yeah, it didn't reach out and grab me as something I had to see, but as a horror fan, I think it was something, I wanted to. I will get to at some point. I'll put it that way.
I'll put it to you this way. People are literally comparing it to The First Omen. And with like, some people actually liked it better than The First Omen. I think I like The First Omen a little bit better than Immaculate, but I think they're pretty comparable. Like, Immaculate did way better than I ever expected it to.
Okay. Interesting. And yeah, something you were saying there, because it does seem at the moment Sydney Sweeney is public enemy number one, which is a bit over the top, internet.
Yeah.
Calm down, folks. She, I mean, I don't think she's like the most amazing actress, but I think she's not good. Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of treat her like she's this, bimbo who's only hired because she's got big boobs, and it's like,
yeah.
I think give her a little bit of credit. I don't think she's not like Neve Campbell or what's the girl that was in the 50 Shades movies? Dakota.
Oh, the one who's related to Elvis. Yeah.
Is she related to Elvis? I know her father is Don Johnson and her mother's Melanie Griffith. Dakota Johnson.
Yeah.
Horrible.
I'm pretty sure
that girl. Wow.
I too, just because I did these as a rewatch, and it was part of my 1,000 subs stream.
And congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. So I watched both Dangerous Liaisons and Cruel Intentions.
Oh, very cool.
Cruel Intentions is the modern remake. In case people don't really know what the story is. So the original story is a period drama, basically. And, you get this sort of womanizing character who's played by John Malkovich in the first film. And he is kind of bored with, kind of easy seduction in a way, and wants a bit of a challenge. So he makes a pact with like the Glenn Close, or makes a bet with the Glenn Close character, and sort of sets his eyes on this virginal woman who's played by Michelle Pfeiffer in that film. And it's sort of one of those bets type thing between the two of them. And along the way, he starts to fall in love with the Michelle Pfeiffer, and that's kind of what the film is about in a way. Then he falls for this girl.
Was Meg Tilly in that also? I remembered Meg Tilly being in it, or was it her sister Jennifer Tilly?
No, neither of them, unless it was a small role. I mean, there's a lot of people in it. Uma Thurman's in it. There's a small role for Keanu Reeves.
Oh, wow. I didn't
a little bit before Bill and Ted, so a young Keanu Reeves. I know the two films have got they do have a link because the actress who plays Cecile's mum is also in Cruel Intentions as a different part, I think, in Cruel Intentions. I forget who she plays at, but yeah, she's in both films, and she does age remarkably. Also, I'll say that she, like, considering it's about a 10-year gap, she does age pretty well, really good. Like, I'm not always the biggest period drama fan, but like this one was very like stylish and well done, and it had really good music, and yeah, I think it just captures the themes of that story and the novel really well, and felt very sort of faithful, and it was really well cast. I mean, Malkovich is very, you know, menacing in that role. The story and the appeal of the story is then, for a lot of the film, you think he's the true villain, but I think in a way the Glenn Close character is the true, like, she's working him and playing him, and like she's the one pulling the strings. So
and I think they illustrate that a little bit more concretely in Dangerous Intentions. I mean,
in the remake,
Dangerous Intentions, Cruel Intentions, and mix the two names together. Cruel Intentions. They definitely made the stepsister character more villainous than Ryan. I think it's Ryan Felipe.
Yeah,
the John Malkovich character.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because like you're so used to Malkovich being menacing and being a villain, so yeah. Whereas I think in the remake, I would say after a while, Philippine, yeah, he just comes across as this guy who's a little bit naive and, you know, has gotten a bit out of his depth. Whereas I think Malkovich, up to a point anyway, you think he's constantly manipulating things and is very sort of icy and in control. But it's a fun one for that sort of time, because it is good to see a true female villain who gets to have a lot of fun. And I think definitely in the remake, it's a good role for Sarah Michelle Gellar around the time she was playing Buffy, because I think she enjoys playing villains and she plays them very well. And I've always said I think Cruel Intentions, outside of Buffy, is her best performance. Like, I think she's really great in it, and you can see her having a lot of fun. And there's a lot of fun, like, comedy beats in that movie. You know, I think, although it's a bit unbelievable and she's as young as she's playing, but I do think Selma Blair is like just hilarious in it. Just she makes the character so puppy dog and sort of playful, and you know, I love the whole peace out thing, and like the Sarah Michelle Catherine watching on. So I think the remake isn't as good, but I think as remakes go, I think it does a good job of updating the story, some more modern themes, and it's just quite sort of playful and witty. It's a little bit meta and a little bit dated now. I think that's what's funny about the two films. Even though Dangerous Liaisons is a period piece and was in the 80s, it sort of does feel a bit less dated than Cruel Intentions does. Like, there's just some language in Cruel Intentions which has dated, like the way they refer to gay people at times. Yeah, it's just what it is. And I mean, obviously, at times these aren't meant to be nice characters, so you have to sort of see it through that lens as well. But it's just always funny when, like, the older film is the one that has dated less, sort of thing. I know there's a couple of tough rape scenes in Dangerous Liaisons. One in particular, which is quite hard to watch. But yeah, again, product of the time a little bit. But I think they're both good films. You know, I do enjoy Cruel Intentions as a remake. There's some good music. They cast it very well. and it's a good alternative to the original movie, and I think that's what you want from a remake. You want something a bit different. It's just probably certain 90s tropes which stand out a bit and seem a little bit dated now, but enjoyable movie anyway. I have a fair bit of nostalgia for it.
Creepshow 2 because a friend of mine had never seen it.
Okay.
They saw a post from Darcy the Mail Girl, who co-hosts The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs on Shudder. And on her, I think it was her Instagram page, she posted a scene from the movie where this goo is kind of tearing off half of this young lady's face. And so they messaged me and was just like, do you know what movie this is from? Because I want to watch it. I said, oh, that's from Creepshow 2. That's from The Raft. And so on Saturday, I showed them Creepshow 2. They said their favorite segment was the Thanks for the Ride Lady, followed by The Raft. But the first one with the cigar store Indian was interesting too. I think it's a pretty good follow-up to Creepshow. Of course, it had the same writer, Stephen King, did the screenplay for Creepshow and for Creepshow 2. But I think Creepshow was directed by George A. Romero. I'm not 100% sure who directed Creepshow 2, whether it was still George A. Romero or whether they got a different director. But I think it really holds up.
Okay. I want to say it's a different director. I'm pretty sure it was.
It felt like it was a different director.
Yeah, different feel to it. Okay. Yeah. It's one I've never seen, actually.
Oh, really? Have you seen
I hear. No.
Oh, you've got to check those out. I think you'd really enjoy them. They really are. I mean, comparatively, they're probably the best two anthologies that I can think of being made. The only ones I think would hold up to those is there was one from the 70s. I can't remember whether it was called Tales. There was like a 1970s Tales from the Crypt. I think it was 1972. That was really good.
I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think the reason why as anthologies those hold up better than say like a VHS or ABC to Death, I think it's more the word that comes to me is congruent, but I don't know if that's the correct term I want to use. But all the stories have the same level, and I think it's because they had the same writer. In both Creepshows, Stephen King wrote the screenplays for both, and both feature some short stories that are from his collection of short stories and novels. And I think that's what made it more even. Like how, usually when you watch an anthology, there's usually like 2 or 3 that are really good that you love, and then there's a couple that are like, well, those sucked.
That's normally the way,
these every segment is good. Like I can't say there's a segment that was bad. You can say there's a segment that you like the best or is your favorite, but there isn't a bad segment. And I think that's what makes them so strong. And practical effects?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Then you would really love them. Lots of practical effects. Very great practical effects at that. Tom Savini did the effects for both movies.
Okay, great choice. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, I'll definitely check those out. I remember seeing, I think I saw episode 1 of the recent Shudder series.
Oh yeah. The TV series, I don't think the TV series is quite as good as the movies, but I think again it's the writing. It's they're getting, I mean, they are making shorts or the segments off of what properties they can get a hold of, and they probably can't afford Stephen King, so
well, especially Shudder, I guess. Cinema tonight. I used my 2 free monthly tickets that I have at that cinema. Me and my mum went, and we went to see Back to Black, the Amy Winehouse film.
Oh, how was that?
It was good. I think it does fall into those little like biopic sort of trappings. You definitely have those moments where it's like, okay, we've seen the way this plays out like a million times, and it's it does fall into those typical biopic like moments of certain moments when she's like jamming or like writing a song, or like you just have a line of dialogue which she then uses like as a song title. And there are certain cliches in it, like it, and I think watching it, it's a bit hard.
Yeah, because she's not with us.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very tragic story, and you can see it unfolding, and you can see it going down the path. And sometimes when you know then it's leading that way, it can make it a bit harder to watch, because it's just depressing. You know, she's obviously no longer with us, and she was only 27 when she died, and you just think, I mean, so much talent, and also the fact that, you know, maybe just a couple of life decisions and a bit better advice from certain people, you know, she may well still be with us now. You know, she obviously didn't have to go down the path she went down, and it's a tough watch before that. Because of that, I should say. I think the actress they've got playing her does a really good job. It's a virtual unknown, which I think was a smart choice, really, because I don't think you wanted anyone too known, so it would be like distracting. And this actress has just been in like a few things, so she's sort of virtually unknown, and she's about the right age. She's about 27, but she definitely has that sort of look. And I mean, Sam Taylor Wood, who, you know, is building quite a nice little CV. Like, I know she also did Nowhere Boy, the John Lennon movie, which I haven't seen, but I know she kind of has a niche for this kind of film. And yeah, she does have an art background, and I think you can see that in some of the scenes. Like, some of the scenes do feel like kind of pop videos type things, the way they're filmed. So, I mean, I liked it. I would say it's a good film. She's very good in it, and it's a solid cast. I think the music scenes are well done. It's a shame they didn't focus a bit more on those. I mean, they do go down the rabbit hole of like the relationship stuff, and there's bits where it can feel a little bit soapy because of that. But it's a good film. It was very well done, and it was immersive, and yeah, just always going to be a bit of a sad watch, really, because you know the way it's going to play out.
I had talked about Late Night with the Devil. There were some people that were saying that it reminded them of Ghostwatch, which I hadn't heard of. So I looked it up, and on Shudder, they had Ghostwatch. So I watched that. Apparently, it was similar to Late Night with the Devil, in that it's done as a TV show format. And it was broadcast in the UK, I think in the 90s. Let me just double check the year. 1992.
Yeah, I do know of this show, yeah.
And it actually fooled some people who didn't catch it from the absolute beginning, where there was a disclaimer letting people know that this is a dramatization and it's just a movie. People who didn't catch that disclaimer at the very, very beginning tuned in and thought that it was real. And also because the main host, he's like, don't know, his name is Michael Parkinson.
He's well known in the UK.
Yeah, it would be like if in America they had like Anderson Cooper, who's always on CNN or MSNBC. I forget which news channel he's a presenter on, but it's as if you took someone from one of those news presenter channels and put them in this. And I can imagine someone turning on the television assuming that person is just doing another news special. But it was really, really interesting to see. And it actually holds up. I didn't think that any of it was going to be creepy or entertaining because it's so old. It's from 1992. But it was actually still pretty effective. I loved the way they did it. I liked the characters. I liked the family. I liked seeing the location. I think they kept calling it an estate. They were in an estate where the different houses, I don't know what their houses are, whether they're like duplexes or multifamily, but they all look kind of similar, and it almost reminds you of the house that The Conjuring 2 was based off of. But yeah, it was really, really interesting. I definitely someone else was in it, Craig Charles. which I love Craig Charles. I know him from Red Dwarf.
Red Dwarf.
So every time I saw him, I kept on thinking he's going to talk like Lister and talk about the chicken vindaloo, but no. But yeah, I think that's a great double feature with Late Night with the Devil, which I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll just go into that one too. I got passes to see Late Night with the Devil, so I got to see that for free, and the audience reaction was great. I really loved the 70s feel of it. The only criticism that I would have is that I wish they had put commercials. I wish they would have put like real like 1970s commercials so that you stayed in the moment of watching a TV show. Because they didn't have those commercials, they just had the behind the scenes that were in black and white. It kind of took me out of the moment, but I still enjoyed it a lot. And I didn't expect for the gore to be there like it was in this. Like, they didn't have the demon talk as grimy as like Reagan in The Exorcist, but the demon still said a few things that were nasty. But there was some really great practical effects scenes in this. Like, there's a whole sequence. I shouldn't spoil it. I won't spoil it. You just got to see it for yourself. It's on Shudder now. But there's a gore sequence that's really, really good. And it's done practical effects. Loved it. There is one bit of controversy about it. The opening credits for the TV show, they said that they had them rendered using CGI, not CGI, using AI.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people were kind of upset about that because that's a job that could have gone to a visual artist.
Yeah, I've heard this. I've heard this story. Yeah, hot topic at the moment. But
did you get a chance to see it?
No, I didn't. I'll still see it. Obviously, I mean, I might have to see it on Shudder.
Oh yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it after you see it.
I do want to see it. It is one of the horror movies that's getting a lot of hype right now, and
did you see
I can see. Sorry,
did you see?
No, I've never seen it. It's one of those that
I was interested because so many people from the UK said that it scared them to death when they were children because they saw it on television when they were kids, so it like really stuck with them. Yeah,
well, see, I would have been about 12 when it came out, so
these are the people. They were saying they were 8 and 9 years old.
Okay,
I guess their parents just weren't watching what they were watching. So
yeah, maybe I wasn't so much of a horror fan then, but I guess it's just something you have to have been watching then. Otherwise, I know sometimes they show it at cinemas now around Halloween, like October.
Oh wow!
Because it's been turned into that sort of urban legend almost sort of event. So
I also imagine so many children caught it because it was on broadcast television. It premiered on broadcast television rather than the movies or
very
cable.
Easy, because it does have the feel of the similar thing that happened with the War of the Worlds radio broadcast with Orson Welles, where the Americans thought that was legitimate. So it definitely reminds me of that.
A similar thing happened in America with the Blair Witch Project. I'll take a couple minutes to tell you because I was out the Blair Witch. It had just popped up in like different forums. You'd be online and people would say, "Oh, have you heard about the Blair Witch?" And people would be like, "What are you talking about?" And they would link to the Burkittsville website. So then people would read the Burkittsville website and read about the Blair Witch. And then like 3 months later, they kept on saying, "Oh, did you hear what happened to those kids that went to go look for the witch in Burkittsville?" And this is all internet forum stuff. So everybody's like, "What are you talking about?" And you go back to the website and it's like, "Oh, they're missing," and they have their pictures up there. And so it's like the first virally marketed movie. Before there was ever a trailer, before anything, it was just internet rumors. And I thought that was brilliantly played to have people pop up on the internet into different chat forums and just drop these little clues. So when the movie finally comes out, there's like a mythos around it because you have all these people that really believe, because the Burkittsville website, it looked very official. It looked like a real official county website. And mind you, this is in the 90s where there aren't a whole hell of a lot of websites. So most people think if it looks official, it's probably official. Whereas today you always have to second guess everything because there's so much. But to try to recapture that, that's why it's hard to describe the Blair Witch to a younger generation that didn't live through the internet virality of it, because you're not going to get the same effect because you weren't there for the virality of it in the chat rooms being baited with these little gems, and B, you've seen so many derivative works that are copying from it. It's not going to have the same impact.
The marketing for that film was genius, and at the time it felt very fresh and original, and I like the fact that on set they were being very authentic, like a lot of times, because it was so low budget anyway. So a lot of times it was just the filmmakers literally just scaring the actors, sort of thing, and the actors being sucked in, thinking that is there something out there in the woods? I mean, I kind of love stuff like that because it's very hard to pull it off now because we are a bit more clued up, a bit more cynical, and there's a lot more information out there. And I remember I had fun with people because I've got a Blair Witch t-shirt, and the t-shirt is literally the Wanted poster, so with the 3 characters.
Nice.
And so some people who aren't clued in, they see that t-shirt and they just think that's a real thing, like I'm advertising these people I'm missing. So that's really funny. I enjoyed having some fun with that, but that's good stuff. We'll have a bit of Omen chat.
Okay.
Now I think we'll talk about the first Omen together. So I'll just mention this month I have been watching the other Omen films. So I've been catching up on some of the ones I haven't seen. So some of the sequels, I've been doing them on stream. The only one I haven't seen now is the remake from 2006.
16? Oh, no, 2006, you're right.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, that's nearly 20 years. I can't believe it. Crazy. So that's the only one I've got to see now.
The same. I've seen all the Omens, although I do need to rewatch the 4th one because it's been probably a decade since I've seen the 4th one.
Yeah. So the 4th one was the made-for-TV film, and I'd just say to sum that one up, because I did have some fun with how silly and goofy it was, the plot, and I sort of thought about it as like Child's Play meets Omen. That's kind of the way that film played out for me. So I know it's like very low budget and probably was made in Canada because there's quite a few Canadian, because I know it's got that actor Don Davis who was in like the X-Files and Twin Peaks, and it's got the one who plays Mulder's sister in X-Files. She's in it, so I think she's probably like one of these like local Canadian actors, because she's on like the V miniseries as well, apparently. So she has a bit of a thing. Yeah, but that one, I mean, obviously it's not a good movie. I'm not going to say it's a good movie, but
I still enjoy it. A piece of me enjoys The Omen 4.
Yeah, no, it's definitely one of those that ticks the guilty pleasure type box. It was nice seeing Michael Lerner as well, who's sadly passed away now, but he was a bit of a character actor, and he, of course, is brother to Ken, who people know played the original principal on Buffy in series 1. So he's his brother, but he's very recognizable character actor because he would have been in Barton Fink, the Coen's film, which is 91 as well, so the same year as The Omen 4. So that's quite the contrast, but he's always given it his all, and he has a particularly entertaining death because that's the death where it's like the big crane, the big cement crane ball, and the way it's shot, you sort of know that's how he's going to die, but it sort of throws you off a bit because you don't realize that it's on the other side of like this porter cabin. So it literally goes through the porter cabin window and ends up like getting him that way. You sort of think it's on the other side, like, so it's on his side, so it's just going to hit him straight on. But it actually goes through the window. It's a bit more elaborate than that. And yeah, no, it's obviously a fun, trashy movie, that one. There's definitely some fun to be had. The plot is kind of insane. where am I? 3 was pretty dull. I was disappointed in 3.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's obviously nice to see a young Sam Neill, like he's very menacing, but the ending of that film was a bit lame. Like it was a bit anticlimactic. I mean, small spoilers, but I guess they just wanted an excuse for a Damien showdown with Christ itself, and you've got the scene at the gates of hell, and it was a bit lame.
Yeah, it's not as entertaining as the first 2.
No, I would agree, and I think, as I said, even as a guilty pleasure, I probably enjoyed 4 a little bit more, just because it was like more silly and more sort of hijinks. Yeah, I did find 3 quite boring to watch at times, but 2 was a solid sequel. I quite enjoy 2. I think there's some good hammy dialogue in 2. I remember getting a laugh out of, there's a scene where the family are on the ice and the kids are playing like ice hockey. And one thing I noticed is there always seems to be a sporting scene that links these movies. Because I think in the Sam Neill one, there's like hunting or something, isn't it? Like they're on horses. And the first one, it's rugby, I think. Yeah, rugby.
If you ever get a chance to look up the making of the hockey scene in The Omen 2, they actually had a stunt person actually fall through the ice, and I don't know whether they swam or let the water carry them up to the other part. Like,
right,
I would be so scared to do that. Hopefully, they probably had a line that they were attached to. But what a scary stunt to have to go underneath the ice. Yeah.
Shit. Yeah, that's why we pay you the big bucks. Tidbits like that. But yeah, I remember that scene because for some reason they're cooking a barbecue even though it's like snowy outside.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you doing? Is this some sort of crazy rich person thing? This makes no sense.
But I wonder if it's a New England thing, because I've known people. I'm from the New England region of America, where it's the northeast coast, and some people do barbecue in the wintertime. So I wonder if it's a regional thing that we do it up there. I haven't seen people do it anywhere else. Like, I haven't heard people in the West Coast or Midwest do it, but I could, if you guys are watching this and you're in different parts of the US or other parts of the UK or Europe, please let us know if you barbecue in the wintertime.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued. And they were that sort of family. They were quite sort of blue blood type thing. And it's a decent enough sequel, the second one. And the first one's obviously a little bit of a staple. Like,
oh, yes.
I think it's a little overrated. You know, it doesn't quite go near the top of my horror list the way it would some people, because I know some people prefer it over The Exorcist. And
I'm not.
I can't agree with that.
Yeah, I can't. The Exorcist over The Omen every time, but I do see its value as just a film, not even as just a horror film, but even as, to me, I feel like The Omen is more of a drama with horror elements. But the filmmaking process is just gorgeous to see, from the acting, the setup of the story, the dialogue, the locations. Like, there's so much care and thought put into it. That's what makes me respect it so much as a movie. It's not the scariest thing I've ever seen. It's never been scary to me. The Omen has never been scary to me. Not the way The Exorcist kept me up at night, but I respect it just as just the beauty in what they did filmmaking wise, and even how. I remember also writing in my notes about how even the sets looked good. Most of the movie was shot on location, but they did use a set for the graveyard scene when they were digging up the jackal and everything. That was a set. I thought that was a really good use of a set. The only thing that you can notice after repeated watchings is the scenes with the dogs. They try to make the dogs seem menacing, and they overlay, with the sound of the dog snarling, but you can see the dogs licking them and wagging their tails. So it's like, these dogs, you're trying to edit it like they're attacking you, but they're playing with you, and it's all right. We know the dogs weren't harmed.
Yeah, they're happy about something. Very good. Very good. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think it's a good film. It's a very strong film, but it's just not in that same sort of league for me. But
Have you heard about the Omen Curse?
maybe, but you can refresh my memory because it's been a
After
while.
after this, I'll send you a link to a documentary that was done about it. There were so many things that happened on set when they were trying to film, and then also things that happened before and after the filming. Like both, I think the director and the one of the producers' planes were both hit by lightning, and then a third plane they were supposed to take, but they ended up getting delayed for some reason, so they had to reschedule their flight. That flight crashed, and then the special effects technician or coordinator that did the decapitation scene, he was in a car accident in which his wife was decapitated. Like there's so many like really odd things that happened to the people that made the movie. It almost rivals the Poltergeist curse.
I suppose we might as well get into the First Omen, the prequel that just came out. So if you want to give your thoughts on it, and then I'll respond with mine.
Oh, okay. I was very, very interested in how they were going to link them together. Because I'm like, how could you make a First Omen since he was quote unquote born of a jackal? I was like, it's going to be the jackal's backstory. but they did a really interesting story. They shot on location in Rome, which was really great to see. The acting was pretty good. There were some elements that were confusing, but then they revealed what they meant later on in the movie, so you have to really pay close attention to the dialogue, which I enjoyed. Some of the scenes were gorgeous. Like there's a scene where she's standing, maybe it's in a rectory, where the candles, there's like 2 rows of candles, but when the camera pulls out, the candles form like a face, and it looks like the top row of candles are the top row of teeth, and the bottom row of candles are bottom row of teeth, and then there's 2 candles for the eyes. It just looks really creepy. I kind of like that they shot it as a period piece, in the 70s. They did pretty good to make you feel like you're really watching a 70s movie. I just wish they would have made the film look like more grainier. I almost feel like that would have been an added touch if you made it look like it really was a 70s movie instead of it being so crisp and glossy kind of.
Yeah.
I felt like they could have let the camera linger a little bit more on the practical effects, so because I could see that they did practical effects, but they cut away so quickly. They never let you fully see what you're looking at. It's very, very quickly shown to you. It's possible that could be more effective for people. There was what I call a Blumhouse jump scare.
Yeah.
in the bedroom scene with when she hung her cloak up on the thing, that scene. I'm trying to speak in a way that if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the movie, it won't spoil you. That was the one, what I call Blumhouse jump scare. But the majority of the movie was not like that. It was very quietly atmospheric, dread, kind of impending dread. And there's one scene that the actress does that. Have you seen the movie Possession from 1981?
Yes, I talked about it the last time we were on doing.
Oh, yeah.
Because I watched it that month. Yeah.
You know the scene I'm talking about, where the actress, she starts to act very similarly to that character in Possession. I thought that was a pretty interesting scene.
I think there's an inference there, definitely.
Yeah. But I enjoyed it for what it was. I enjoyed it. They added a little bit to the story to set up for maybe a reboot. I'm not so sure how I feel about rebooting The Omen. I'm a little iffy about it. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like
the ending was a bit okay.
Yeah.
We've been here before. Yeah. I mean, at some point they'll probably bring it back because it's obviously a big enough franchise, but the movie has flopped. So, I mean, I think it might be a while.
Yeah.
But a few years down the road, you could see it maybe.
Yeah, when I went to see it, the theater wasn't full, and I went to a screening, so the passes were free, and the theater wasn't full.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's I think when I went, there was a few maybe. I need to rewatch this film because there was just something a bit missing. Like for whatever reason, it just didn't click, and I know it's clicking for a lot of people, so. I think it is quite well directed, and definitely early on, I was getting the feel of, yeah, this looks like Rome in the 70s. So I did appreciate that, definitely. And the lead was good. I thought the lead was solid. I've not seen her in anything before. I know she's been in a few things, but I think this was pretty much the first time I'd seen her. So
yeah, same.
I thought she was well cast. I believed her in that role. And you've got a pretty solid supporting cast. I mean, for UK fans, you've got Finchy from The Office, Ralph Inkson, who plays the father, who's now become a character actor. He appears in like lots of horror movies and does lots of voiceovers, so he's very familiar. But yeah, it just didn't click for me. Like I think the direction was good up to a point, but I didn't really think the horror scenes were that good. Like I think they felt a bit flat to me. Like it almost felt like she was a good director in general, but maybe she just didn't have the touch for a horror movie. I'm not sure. Because obviously you mentioned the visual effects and stuff, and I definitely applaud them trying to do practical, but I didn't really like the effects from what I saw. I thought they were a bit typical ropey big studio type effects. They sort of took me out of it. Some of them, I mean, there was probably a mix, but like,
I think there was a mix because I'll just call it the
some.
creature. The creature of there was like an effect where you could see the creature's hands that looked like practical effects, but then there was an effect where you see the whole creature and that looked like it was CGI.
Yeah. And I think another thing with me in it was then at times it didn't quite make up its mind what sort of film it wanted to be. Like I think at times it felt like it was being a bit more cheeky, a little bit more campy and hammy, and let's do a pantomime, let's do a pastiche. But I don't think it ever went far enough with that.
I get what you're saying. It
Yeah.
almost felt like, even though I enjoyed the movie, I think I would have enjoyed it more if they really committed to that 1970s feel. It seemed like they wanted to go for that 1970s feel, but then they caved and said, "Oh no, we got to give the audience boo jump scares, or else they're not going to like it." And I'm like, you're undermining yourself by doing that. Like you had something going, and then you caved to trying to do,
I think
a different type of film. I really wish they would have stuck to their guns on doing like a really 70s style movie.
I think that might be right, because I was watching it and I think for a little while, for about half of it, I thought, well, this maybe it's going to turn into a different sort of movie than you're used to. And so, yeah, maybe they are doing this more arty type film, a different kind of film that we're used to nowadays anyway. And yeah, then they didn't really go the full horror. Roommate, who I thought was going to be quite a big character, and then she sort of just disappears from the film for quite a long time. And it's sort of implied, I mean, I won't go too far into spoilers because obviously a lot of people might not have seen it, but it's implied that she could be a villain. She could be behind some of the stuff that's going on. But yeah, I thought that was a bit of a shame because I thought they had quite a nice chemistry. And I think even if you want to make her a villain, it sort of means a bit more if you see them together more and they have a bit more of a connection. Like that reveal would have landed more anyway.
I wouldn't be surprised if they end up releasing a director's cut, because it almost feels like the director had to cut things out of the movie for time because they didn't want a 3-hour horror movie. So it feels like which I did find out for Immaculate, that they had to cut some scenes because they were, I guess the ending was a little bit too over the top with the gore. They were going to make it an X rating, so they had to cut some of the gore scenes to get a rated R. And I imagine with the first Omen, they might have had to cut some things out for time. I don't think this movie is not as gory, but I think for time, a lot of the producers want the movies to be shorter, because if the shorter the movie is, the more showings they can show per day and make more money. So that's why they typically push to make people shorten their movies.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying with that, but I think what's funny is, in general, I think movies nowadays are longer on average. Like, I think they're too long. I mean, maybe there's just this attitude with blockbusters where they sort of feel we're putting it all on screen, so we're going to give you a 3-hour movie. We're going to give you your money's worth. Whereas horror, it does tend to stick relatively short. I mean, I know some horrors do go up to like 2 hours and a little bit more, and some people think that's a bit overlong for horror. I mean, I guess it depends what movie it is, but
and what story you're trying to tell.
What
like
story?
Yeah, if you're and the genre. For me, I feel that if you're making a slasher movie, don't do more than 88 minutes for me. For a slasher movie, get in, get your kills, and get out. I don't want to watch it too. And that's one of my complaints about the Terrifier series. They're too long. Those movies, you don't need to make the Terrifier that long. No, it doesn't need to be that long. It's just.
I think I would agree with that.
Yeah.
First Omen, there was a lot of characters, so it did feel like there was maybe a bit too much, where you definitely could have extended the film, so there might be a director's cut. I will go back and give it a watch at some point. I enjoyed Ralph Fiennes. His campy sort of Irish accent was fun.
I really enjoyed Abigail. I got to see a screening of it, and then I went back and I paid to see it again in what we have in Orlando called 4DX, which is a style of theater where like everything, it's a very immersive theater experience. Your seat moves. Sometimes they shoot smells at you. If it rains, they'll make it rain in the theater, to make it snow in the theater.
Wow.
There's explosions. You get a hot blast of hot air and your seat rumbles. And to see Abigail in that setting was great, because every time there was, let's say, some blood splatter, because I'll wait until we get into the spoiler section.
Yeah.
They shot water on your face so that whenever there was blood splattering, you would feel like the blood was splattering on you. And I'm like, that's a really great concept to watch horror movies. It reminded me of when William Castle released a tingler in movie theaters, and he rigged the seats to zap people whenever the tingler was on screen. And I was like, what a great concept to bring back to theaters. Bring back horror movies in 4DX, because it's so much fun. Found out after watching it that Abigail is done by Universal, which technically makes her a Universal monster. Initially, this movie in concept was going to be called Dracula's Daughter, and it was going to be part of that Universal monster thing. But when Voyage of the Demeter didn't do so well theatrically, they kind of retooled the script and changed the name to Abigail.
Got cold feet, right? Very well. That was going to be one of my points, because I think it's a shame then it was revealed that it is a vampire movie.
Yes, the trailer. Oh, the trailer did this movie a disservice.
Yeah, because it would be one thing if that's revealed quite early in the film. Like, then it's not so much of a spoiler anyway, but it's a good sort of half an hour, 40 minutes into the movie before that's revealed. So to me, that does count as a spoiler, and it does count as quite a big reveal. And I mean, it's one of those movies you definitely get twists after that. But I mean, if it was in the first 10 minutes, I could excuse it. I could say, that's fair enough, because it's almost in the setup of the movie. But to me, that's a pretty big spoiler. And I think it's one of those movies, the least you know going in, the better.
Yeah.
So that's a shame.
The way I would have recut the trailer would be to show them, doing the kidnapping, them getting to the house, show Abigail telling Melissa Barrera's character, "I'm sorry for what's going to happen to you," and then just cut to, I won't say which character, the character that's sitting in the kitchen whose head falls off in the trailer. Yeah. Then you have to go to the movie to find out, how did his head fall off? What happened to him? That would have been so much better than for you to reveal one. It wasn't the only plot twist that was revealed in the movie, but to reveal that in the trailer was, that was terrible. I hate that they did that.
Yeah.
because it's a really good movie.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really enjoyed this movie. I think it might be their best movie so far, this team. I would have to think about that. Because I was a bit mixed on their two Scream movies. I much preferred 6 to 5. I thought 6 was an improvement, which is why it's a shame they're not doing 7, because it would have been good to have seen them round off the trilogy. Enjoyed Ready or Not, but I don't think it quite lived up to the hype. Because I've rewatched it since, and I still
also some of it
enjoy it, but maybe
some
not.
of its fire was taken because it was released at the same time as the movie The Hunt, which was also a woman being hunted down. So it's like they kind of because they were released so close to each other, I think it took some of the wind out of its sails. All the blood, the director actually apologized to the actors for how much blood that they got pretty much poured on them or blasted at them.
Yeah, no, it was pretty insane. I enjoyed a lot of that stuff. I thought the horror scenes were very well done. It was very sort of slick and stylish, and the gore scenes were very, very satisfying. And it worked so well because they built to them. They really made them count, because most of them was in the back half of the movie. Like, they definitely had to have a little bit of a slow burn, a little bit of a suspense. And I mean, they did cast it very well throughout the movie. There was a lot of little gems, like I really enjoyed the Kevin Durand character, just because because I know him from Lost, and in Lost he's just playing a big, sort of bulked up, like macho sort of guy. So I like that he's playing against type, because he is the one who's like the more naive sort of like naive sort of gentle giant one sort of thing. And I quite enjoyed the relationship with him and the Catherine Newton, the hacker one, and how he sort of looked out for her as well. I thought they had quite a nice thing, but I did like them as a group because they were all quite different. So they all sort of played off against each other quite well, it was a good somber. I really enjoyed Dan Stevens. He had a lot of really fun lines. And it took me a while to realize it was him. He looked really different.
He does look different, because last time I believe I saw him was in The Visitor, I think it was called. The Visitor. No, The Guest. The Guest.
Yeah, and that's a good film. That's quite an underrated film. But I think he's one of those. I think ever since Downton Abbey, because for a while people knew him from Downton Abbey.
Oh, is he also British?
Yeah.
He does such a good American accent. I just assumed he was American. Wow, he did a great accent.
Yeah, but I think it's almost a similar thing to like what we were talking about before with like Christian Stewart, Robert Pattinson. It's almost like he wants to escape that kind of role now. He wants to like do different things and not be typecast as like a posh sort of British guy. So he's definitely developed quite the CV in horror movies, whole mystery vibe to it, and I think they played the reveals very nicely, because for some reason I was getting Usual Suspect vibes to it, because it did feel very pulpy 90s thriller.
It was a little the dialogue when they were in the lounge together was very Tarantino-esque. Like when they're talking to each other, and they're very Tarantino. Even them having the nicknames, because when you think of Reservoir Dogs, all of them had nicknames. It was like Mr. Brown, Mr. White, Mr. Pink, and so they had to have nicknames also to protect their anonymity. So I kind of got that connection.
Yeah. So I think we're on the same page because I thought Tarantino, and I did get Usual Suspect vibes, and I think partly because of the paranoia and the mistrust in the group. Character who we don't see to the end, but like the father of the girl, he felt like the Kaiser Sose of the movie, like the way they were building up his mystique and legend.
Amped it up. Like I was saying earlier, how they had changed the concept from Dracula's daughter to Abigail, and I do think that Megan probably inspired them to make it a little bit campier. Oh, have her dance around. We'll call it by the girl's name.
That's true.
I really think they took the success of Megan and said, "Oh, we can be a little bit more tongue in cheek."
Because again, we're getting into spoilers, guys. So if you want to mute the video, if you haven't seen the movie, but or jump back. But like, I mean, I really like one thing I really liked about it is I liked how you had the relationship with the Marissa Barrera character and the gal. And I kind of like how they came back to that later with the pinky sort of promise sort of thing. I know it's a little bit cliched, but I did like that they set that up early in the movie and then it paid off later on. To me, that's always like good sort of storytelling. Out of the crook, she was the most sympathetic. So I think when you had the stuff at the end, and, you know, she's the one you sort of gravitated more to because she had the backstory with her son. So I think because of that, you wanted her more than anyone to get out of it and survive. So they set that stuff up really well. But at one point, because of the way that stuff was set up and because she seemed like the one least likely to do anything to the girl, it did cross my mind if she was going to be the villain of the movie at one point. The girl was very good. The girl was,
yeah, she was
again a newcomer, but she was very effective in the role.
And I like that bit of acting by the actor who played her father, because a lot of his acting was just with his face. Like when he finally comes at the end of the movie, and you finally see the realization on his face of, oh, you're doing this because you need me to give you attention. Oh, it's like it finally dawned on him. He finally understood and embraced his daughter. I like that because most of the acting was not verbal; it was just in his face, and I like that.
Okay, well, see, this is the scene I was going to mention because the father appears at the end of the film, and it's his only scene, and I agree with you about the actor and the way he plays it, but I thought that was my only small complaint because I think there was more power to not seeing the father because he had been built up and there's this legend around him. And I think that's the one moment where it felt like they were doing it just for a little bit of a twist at the end. And it was a bit, well, is she going to get out of it after all? Yeah, I wouldn't have had the father in the film personally. I think that's just a choice. I think that was a bit of a weaker moment. If I've got one complaint, I think there's just more mystique and power to the father if you don't actually see him. So
I liked him. The one thing that I would criticize is his styling. Like he's supposed to be like this super rich, badass vampire, and it's like, look at like his clothes were not. Like he should have came in there in like the flyest Armani. Like you're a rich vampire. You should have the best clothes, a better outfit, better haircut. Like he should have really looked like the super wealthy, vampire that he's supposed to be. Like the outfit. I feel like the costume department failed on that one. They did well with everyone else. I liked the styling of the hacker. I liked I forget Angus Cloud's character. Like he looked like the flunky type of guy that drives the van. The one thing that was distracting for me with him is that he sounded actually high. Like he didn't sound like he was acting. He sounded like he actually was high. And it's very I wouldn't say, well, yeah, I'm going to keep what my initial thought process was. It's kind of disturbing because he passed away of a drug overdose. So I'm like, was he coming on the set high and just like, this is really sad. They couldn't stop him. It's not like they can parent him, but And it's just a shame to see that he went down that path. I know he suffered from depression. He was probably self-medicating, but that one thing was a little bit difficult. I do like how they gave him a dedication at the end of the movie, and they put his name on the screen, and it was like a graffiti tag Angus, and then the actual cloud drawn around the name. I thought that was nice to give him a memorial.
Yeah.
Other than that, his character lines were funny. I thought he landed his lines pretty well. I just could hear that he was high, but
sometimes when something like that has happened in real life, it's hard to distance that, and there's no way of knowing. I mean, maybe he was just very effective.
He really could have been that good of an actor that he could just sound like he was high, but
maybe it could be a little bit of the two. Maybe because he had a drug problem, he could draw on that for the role. You don't know, but no, it was very entertaining in the movie. Definitely say that and Lisa Frankenstein are my two horror movies of the year so far.
Guess who? Tubi Original is about a girl who goes to visit her fiance's family in a trailer park in Pennsylvania, and they do something called mummering, which is like I'm not sure whether this takes place around Christmas or Halloween, but mummering is like when these people put on masks and they go to people's homes and knock on the door and tell them a riddle. And the person has to answer the riddle in order for the other person to reveal themselves from underneath the mask. It's an old tradition, like probably goes back to like 17 or 1800s, somewhere in Europe, but I'm not sure where in Europe, but there's parts of America where they still do this. And of course there is a slasher going around, taking people out while the night of the mummering is going on. And it was just all right. It was for a Tubi movie. It was better than I thought. They were getting much better. Tubi originals used to be really, really bad. And they're gradually building up to getting better and better. So it's serviceable. There wasn't really the gore I like to see in a slasher movie. It's mostly cutaways. And I did like the mythos of learning about mummering. It actually made me Google because I was like, is this a real thing? And that's when I found out about mummers. And I would give it like a C out of like, A to Z is a C.
Sure.
It's not bad. And the other two movies I would talk about are Psycho Cop and Revenge of Psycho. Is it called Revenge? No, Psycho Cop Returns.
Okay.
Psycho Cop is basically made to capitalize off of the popularity of Maniac Cop, which but it's lower budget. It's not very good. It's kind of campy. Like he always does these one-liners, kind of like almost like a Freddy Krueger-esque one-liner, except for his one-liners are really, really bad. And I just happened to watch both of them because I think they were both on Tubi. No, Psycho Cop was on YouTube, and Psycho Cop Returns was on Tubi. Psycho Cop came out in 89. Psycho Cop Returns comes out in 93. And I mean, they're what you expect. They were direct to video to begin with. They were never theatrically released. So they were direct to VHS, low budget, not a great script. Some of the kills are interesting, but they're not good movies at all. I don't recommend them. I recommend watching Maniac Cop and Maniac Cop 2.
I love the Maniac Cop films. The first two especially.
Psycho Cop is like what GoBots are to Transformers. Like it's not the same.
Okay. Yeah. Well, one of them's on YouTube, so I might watch that one and see. An anime called Suzanne. I don't know if you know of this.
I haven't heard of it.
Okay. Well, it's from the same director who did Your Name. That one you've probably heard of, which is the body swap teenage drama from a few years ago, which I know they're doing a live action version of apparently. And also Weathering with You. That was his follow-up after that. So Suzanne is about a 17-year-old girl of the title, and she takes an interest in this guy, and to try and save basically a nuclear disaster in Tokyo, they have to go around shutting these doors, which are all doors to like some sort of like netherworld. So if
I was
they
going
don't
to say dimension.
Yeah, that kind of thing. It's sort of hard to describe without seeing the film, but like it's that kind of thing where they have to shut these doors, and it's all sort of climate related in some ways. It's all a metaphor for that. But there's these quite quirky visuals of them chasing around this cat as well, because the cat represents like the threat, sorta. He keeps appearing in the form of a chair because he's from the other side essentially, so he takes on a chair form in this realm, sort of thing, because that's the whole thing. He gets trapped in the other realm, so she's trying to save him at the same time as trying to save like the world. Mixes like a coming of age teenage type story with like a supernatural sci-fi. So it's actually, the themes are quite similar to some of the director's other films. That there does seem to be a link with weather and the climate a bit, because Weather with You had quite a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't as keen on this one. Like, it didn't grab me in the same way as those others did, because I really liked Your Name. I liked Weathering with You. I didn't like it as much as Your Name, but I still liked it. And this, I would say, from the ones I've seen by this director, is definitely the weakest. So I think one of the reasons is that maybe, unlike those other two, it does lean a bit more towards like the teen audience. Like maybe it is going for that audience more than the other two, which I think had broader sort of appeal in many ways. So because you do get, I think at times it's very quirky, and at other times it maybe just is leaning a bit towards a teenage girl type story, a little too much, where it means it's maybe not so much aimed at me. Also, there's a few scenes, I think, because the animation in his films I do really like on the whole, but I think there's a couple of scenes in this where it has that feel of being a bit too much lifelike. And so you get this weird sort of in between where it's maybe a bit too detailed or a bit too like pretty and like realistic. And yeah, there's a couple of scenes like that where it feels a little bit like you're in a really advanced sort of video game. But then there's other scenes where I think the animation is sort of spot on. Story about the girl and about her past, because it turns out like she lost her mother, like her mother passed away, and she's been living with, I think it's her sister or maybe like an older, slightly older relative, maybe a cousin or something, but she's living with like a family member because she lost her mother. And some of their scenes together, I think, are some of the best in the movie. So it's one of those films where some of that stuff is maybe a bit stronger than like the supernatural stuff. Because it's funny, sometimes in these movies, it's the other way around. It's like the fantastical stuff that actually make them a bit more interesting to watch, a bit more like immersive and stuff. But it was a little bit in reverse with this one. I actually once you got to know the character a bit more and her relationship and her past, I think that stuff was a little stronger for me than like the fantastical stuff and what they were going for there. But it's a solid movie. It's still worth checking out. It just didn't grab me as much as those other movies, and it could be then maybe they are aiming it a bit younger than those other movies. But I think also the plot at times was a little bit hard to follow, whereas I think like in Your Name it was quite a simple plot in many ways. Like it still had this really unique feel to it, but I think it was just easier to get into the characters and their story and their relationship in that. So yeah, so that's Suzanne, which I don't know about everywhere, but in the UK it's on Netflix now, so I watched it on Netflix.
Deliver Us was on Hulu, and Agnes was on Tubi. Both about nuns having children through immaculate conception and something demonic affecting them. Neither movie as good as Immaculate or The First Omen. They had some great visuals. They were beautifully shot, but the stories were kind of tedious, and they weren't very memorable. I just, and then as I saw those, there's dozens of evil nun movies to be found on Hulu, on Tubi, on Netflix. Going back to the 70s, I started to make a list because I wanted to see like how far back does this trope go. And I think the earliest one I found was like a 1971 movie, I believe. But yeah, as far as Agnes was slightly more entertaining than Deliver Us, but both I was bored to tears. It's a pass for those.
Yeah. So yeah, the lesser of two evils in that case, literally. Yeah, that's interesting. I think I've heard of the first one, Deliver Us.
Yeah, I think it came out in 2023, I want to say.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, it's funny what you're saying. I think the 70s makes sense for the first one because it probably feels like the first decade where they would maybe be that sort of bold, kind of digging into that sort of thing. Probably before that, it might seem a bit off limits sort of thing. And
I often wondered if the evil nun trope came from maybe writers and directors who went to Catholic school and were punished by nuns. So they wrote these screenplays about evil nuns.
It could be. Like, I've been thinking about this recently, like the kind of religious film and the religious themed horror movie, because I am wondering now if maybe because we talked about before the First Omen not doing that well, like being a bit of a flop. And I'm pretty sure the recent Exorcist didn't do that well. Like, I think it did okay, but I don't think it did amazing. And I think they've decided not to go forward.
They spent $400 million to acquire the rights. I don't think they made $400 million back.
No, and nowadays you obviously have to make double because of merchandise advertising costs. But yeah, I'm just wondering if maybe there's a trend that maybe because we now live in different times.
Yeah, I don't think it's as dramatic as it once was. Like in the 70s, to do a religious horror, people were probably quite shocked by it. But now I don't think these things shock us. I don't think they're kind of I don't want to say pedestrian, but people just aren't as shocked by religious horror as maybe they once were.
The Black Hole, the Disney film from the late 70s.
Yeah, I rewatched that about 4 or 5 months ago because I wanted to see it as an adult.
Yeah.
Especially since it was available on, I think, Disney Plus or Hulu. So what did you think of it? Rewatching it as an adult?
Disney Plus for me. Yeah, like I thought it was pretty decent. It's a funny one because it's this weird sort of hybrid, I think, between actually playing it quite straight as a sci-fi movie. And there's certain things about it where you've got like really cool practical effects and you've also got a bit of a budget and you've got pretty strong cast because people like Anthony Perkins, Ernest Borgnine, Robert Foster, who I love, of course. So it's got a pretty strong cast. But you've got that, and then on the other hand, it does. There's moments, especially with those quirky little cute robots, that do feel more like a Disney film, a more family-friendly film, because it's almost like there's other scenes that do have a cozy family of feel to it.
They make you care about the robots. Like you're really worried when that older robot is in danger, and it's like, I know it's not a real person, but I want him to make it out.
But yeah, that's why I had a funny experience with it, because it was kind of being both those things, and yeah, and it looks pretty good for the time because you've got a decent budget behind it, and I do like the practical effects, and yeah, the story works quite well. Like there's some quite fun hammy moments. Like I quite enjoyed the villain, and
Maximilian, I think his name was.
Yeah, great villain name. Hierarchy with the robots, and then you've got different robots. You've got like the villain versions of the robots, which are like darker, and yeah, they almost look more like, I don't know, almost like the Cylons a bit.
I was gonna say that. Yeah, they do look like the Cylons from Battlestar. Yeah.
I was getting that vibe, but yeah, no, it's quite a solid movie. I quite enjoyed it. It's a decent watch, but it's just it's an interesting watch now because you can see little bits of what it was influenced by. But
it seemed like it kind of wanted to capitalize a little bit off of Star Wars, but then it felt a little bit more Star Trek-ish. But then it's also its own thing. I enjoyed it more as an adult than as a child. I think as a child it wasn't fast enough for me to hold my attention. But as an adult, I can watch it and enjoy it.
Yeah, I can see that, how there's things you can appreciate more about it. So
that's just the majority of my attention span. I had a very short, as an adult, I have a short attention span. I have ADHD. So as a child, an ADHD child trying to sit through things.
So, not a bad movie. And it is on Disney Plus, at least in the UK. And so it's quite an easy one to stream. So,
yeah,
The Black Hole.
Speaking of older movies revisited, I watched Porky's.
Okay.
and realized that Porky, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's like one of those gross out sex comedies from the 80s where the guys are just scheming to try to get girlfriends or try to see boobs or anything like that. It used to come on HBO when I was a kid.
Okay.
And rewatching it as an adult, I recognized that I didn't get half of the jokes that were happening in the movie because they were over my head. I was too young to understand them. But now, as an adult, I get all the dirty jokes, which makes it funnier. But also, I didn't realize that it wasn't just a silly comedy movie. There were some great themes in it about kids growing up that have an abusive parent, a character whose parent is unfortunately teaching them racism, and so they learn, or I should say more specifically anti-Semitism, because they were being very, very mean to their Jewish classmate, and it was coming from their parent. And you see this character grow to no longer be that way and actually end up sticking up for their classmate and learning that what their parent is teaching them is wrong as they're coming out of high school, becoming an adult themselves. And you don't expect a silly sex comedy to have that type of messaging in it. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And the director that did it, wrote and directed Porky's, is the same director that did Black Christmas. And he also did A Christmas Story. And I just thought, what an impressive range as a director to go from a horror slasher to a sex comedy to a Christmas film and be great at all three.
In Black Christmas, there's one or two bits of humor which does feel quite Porky's-esque. So I think you can see that he still likes to put them in, even though it's a very different sort of movie. And probably same with Christmas Story as well. But it would surprise many people then he did Porky's. Children shouldn't play with dead things. That's him.
Oh, that was him too?
That's him as well.
That is great.
That's quite a fun cult movie.
Yeah,
that's him. So
that was filmed here in Florida. Children shouldn't play with dead things.
Oh, was it? Okay. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Oh, they hid that well. I sort of assumed it would be Canada because I know he's a Canadian director and it's very low budget. So a theme with me recently watching 80s movies that haven't aged very well. So last month I talked about Electric Dreams, which I watched for the first time and I thought was an absolute terrible film. So you can go and see me talk about that on last month's episode. I also cut out a clip of that. But this month, the film which that applies to is, for the first time, I watched Valley Girl.
Oh.
With Nicolas Cage, a very young Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, that's on. I saw a poster for that on Tubi.
Yeah, it's probably doing the rounds then. Like I just watched it on a UK streaming service, but just a bit of curiosity. Like I didn't have much to go on, and I thought,
how was it? Because I understand that it takes place in a time in the 80s where I guess it's the most stereotypically 80s part, and the whole Valley Girl thing is something that's very specific to a certain part of California in the States.
Yeah,
even the way they talk, they have their own slang and everything.
Yeah, because the setup to the movie is that this girl, the main girl of the movie, I think the character's name's Julie, but she comes out of a relationship at the start of the movie with this kind of jerky guy, and yeah, she's kind of, her friends are always pushing her to get back with him because they think he's like really hunky and all that. And you have a bit of drama, but she meets the Nicolas Cage character, and he's from the other side. He's a punk, just to use that term, and they hit it off. But it's all about the issues with them, really, that get brought up because he's from the other side of the track, so to speak. And that's the whole thing. And there's certain moments. I think some of the best scenes are with her parents, because her parents are like old school hippies. So I think you get some of the best laughs of the film from those characters. But the film itself, I thought, was really boring to watch. It was really hard to sit through, because I think it's one of those where if I grew up with it and watched it in the 80s, it might be different. But also, my feeling is that there's plenty of movies from the 80s that obviously hold up and we now still see as classics. And yeah, this isn't one of them. I think this is definitely dated, and I didn't really find anything charming or endearing about the characters. Like, I just found them really obnoxious, even the characters you were supposed to like and root for. And I just thought, yeah, there's just barely any jokes here. Like, I think the jokes are so sort of one note and kind of plain. And I mean, you said about the dialogue, and maybe the dialogue at the time in a certain part of LA, I think it was, maybe that was true, but it just seems so cartoony to me, you know, like all the characters pretty much just seem so cartoony. And there's some good music in the movie, and there are a couple of scenes that I enjoyed, but I sort of watched it in 2 sittings. Like, it was a bit of a slog because I just didn't find that much humor in it, and I didn't really, as I said, get into the characters and root for the characters, because I think that's the key to like something like The Breakfast Club is I think that movie holds up as well as it does, because there's a lot of good humor, and I think there's enough in there, even though the characters, they are going for the archetypes, but there's enough in there where you can sort of see certain characters that you would say do exist in real life, and just certain experiences that I think most team would go through. And obviously in The Breakfast Club, there are 1 or 2 darker moments as well that sort of pull you in. But I think that's a good example of what maybe this wants to be, and it just sort of fails, really. It's I think it is hard for me because I didn't watch this at the time, so it's hard for me to really have that sort of context. I'm quite a big fan of 80s cinema, and I think there are a lot of classics, a lot of gems from that time, but you will always get films like that where it feels if you watch it outside of the era, maybe it's going to date, and I think this this is definitely one of them. Yeah, so that's Valley Girl anyway.
I think I hear what you're saying about what we call it nostalgia goggles. You see things through. That's the way I feel about the Wraith. I have nostalgia for it because it was always on television when I would come home from school. Like at least once a week, it would either be Beastmaster or the Wraith was on television. So I have nostalgia goggles for it. I don't know whether someone watching it for the first time would still enjoy it the way I do. Last film I'm going to talk about is called Speak No Evil. And it was really, really interesting. It's a thriller, very slow burn thriller. And it's about a Danish family who meets a Dutch family on vacation. And I want to say they were in Tuscany in Italy. And the Dutch family invites them to come for a visit to their house the following year. And they go, and things start out being strange. And then they go to being horribly, horribly wrong. But the most interesting thing about the movie was the interplay of the two cultures, because you get to see a little bit of what Dutch culture is like and a little bit what Danish culture is like. But then it's a little bit exaggerated, and which it has to be in order for the series of events to happen in the movie. And in a nutshell, the Danish family is played to be, super, super polite to a fault. So polite that when they see things that are a little bit off, they don't want to say that, oh, this is strange, because they don't want to seem impolite or be bad house guests. Whereas the Dutch family is, or at least the father and the mother, come across as very, very forward, very, very brash in certain ways. And the Danish family is not sure whether that's just their Dutch culture or are they actually acting out of sorts. And I think that's such an interesting conversation to have within a film. And the way it turned out, the ending, I will say this to people who are planning on watching it, it does not have a happy ending. So if that's the type of thing that's going to bother you, I would steer clear of this. But if you're okay with that, I think it's worth a watch. Now, the other thing I want to say about it that I was a little bit disappointed in is that there's already an American remake. And I watched the trailer for the American remake, and they have an American family with a British family. And they have the British family as being the more aggressive family. And I'm like, already that seems backwards. As loud and as aggressive as Americans are, that seems very, very backward. But I think it could have worked if you made both families American, but make them from different parts of America. Like make one family from New York, where people tend to be very, very forward, very blunt, and have another family that's from down south, where they have, what's called Southern hospitality, where they're ultra polite, don't want to, be seen as bad guests. Or you could have done a Canadian family and an American family and seen the interplay of that.
In your idea, because you obviously could do the movie like that if you had two very different parts of America.
I like how you use the term conservative. That's exactly a great description of the Danish family, because there's one scene, I'll just spoil one scene, where they go out to dinner together, and the Dutch couple, they get up and they start dancing and they start kissing each other, and the Danish couple is taken aback, like, why are they kissing in public? Like, they're that conservative.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a fun idea for a movie. Sounds like you can get some good tension out of that.
Oh, yeah, a lot of tension. And then it goes very dark towards the end of the movie. That was on Shudder.
On Shudder, okay. Okay, so that should be pretty widely available then. That should be probably, I haven't been on Shudder for a while, but probably if I check UK Shudder, it'll
Oh, yeah. And it's in 3 languages. Of course, when the Danish couple are speaking, they're speaking to each other in Danish. When the Dutch couple are speaking, they're speaking to each other in Dutch. But when the couples interact, they speak to each other in English. There's nothing out there The year is, I want to say 1992. It's taking a while to load, but it's a super low budget film. It's about some teens that go out to a cottage for, I don't know whether it's spring break or summer break. It's some type of school break. I can't recall which. And they are accosted by an alien creature.
Okay.
It's a comedy horror movie, and there's a character that acts very similar to Randy in Scream, where he's calling out all the horror tropes. Yes, from 1991. He's calling out all the horror tropes almost before they happen. I think they could have shaved 15 minutes off of it. It's 91 minutes long, but I don't think they had 91 minutes worth of story. Another interesting thing I found out about the director of the movie, the writer-director, he wrote the script when he was a senior in high school, around the age of 17, 18 years old. And he started filming the movie when he was 20 years old. So this is a very, very young person making this movie, or was at the time in 1991. There were a lot of nude scenes. And what's interesting is, of the girls that went to the cabin, all of them have like at least one nude scene. But when he was trying to get distribution, the producer said that there wasn't enough nudity. So just out of nowhere, there's a scene where a van full of punk rock kids pull up, jump out, and just go skinny dipping in a lake. And the scene is only there because the producers told the director that there wasn't enough nudity. And I was like, that's so 90s. It's a very 80s and 90s thing to do.
Yeah.
The creature is kind of strange looking. It kind of looks like a deformed frog, if I had to say what it looks like.
Okay.
They used all practical effects. Another interesting thing I found about the movie is that it was shot in 2 different houses, but they seamlessly make it look like it's all the same house. I wouldn't have known that until I looked at the trivia, but it's very much a 90s super. I should say 80s. I keep saying 80s/90s because it was filmed in 1989, but it wasn't released until 1991. So a lot of the stuff still looks late 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I always say if it's an early 90s film, it's pretty much an 80s film.
Yes.
It takes a few years into a decade, really, to the style to change. So, yeah. Cool. So would you say you quite liked it? Would you recommend people?
I would recommend it if you want something really campy, B-movie. Like, I'm surprised it isn't shot on VHS. It feels like the type of movie that would have been shot on VHS, but somehow he got a hold of some film. so it's not shot on VHS, but it has that feel. If you like that, I would definitely recommend it, especially if you like comedy horror.
Move on to TV.
Foremost, I've been watching X-Men 97, which I'm really enjoying.
Okay.
I like the animation. I like the nostalgia of it. And I like the stories connecting. Because I do believe that this is going to connect to, in some way, to what Marvel is planning for their next phase. Because I don't want to reveal the different things that are happening in the cartoon, but it feels like they're going to connect with not only the Deadpool and Wolverine movie that's coming out this summer, but whatever they have coming down the pipeline for when they relaunch the X-Men into the cinematic universe.
Right. Okay. Cool. So it's, at the moment I'm watching the original. So I'm getting ready for the new one. I'm going to do it. I'm going to watch the original and then watch obviously the new one. So that's I'm on series 2 of the original at the moment, so I'm enjoying that. If you're a fan of the original, I take it this will satisfy you by the sounds of it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Okay.
The only thing I've seen people complain about is that Rogue's booty is not as round as it was in the original animation. I didn't notice, but apparently online some people were like, they
notice everything nowadays.
I was like, okay.
Having a bit of a Star Trek month, and I've sort of gone back and wanted to rewatch all of the main shows from the original run to catch up with them. Because I recently finished my Voyager watch through. Started watching the original series, so going
from the 60s,
all the way back to the 60s.
Ah, nice.
and a little bit to my childhood because I did watch it with my older brother when I was growing up.
Oh
So
yeah,
there's
it
some
was in
nostalgia.
syndication for years. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a big Star Trek fan. I think he still is, but he's probably a bit more casual than he used to be. But he
Yeah,
definitely.
my older brother too. He loves Star Trek, but he is a Whovian, like Doctor Who. That's his.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, like I think with my older brother, like he just over the years he's just fallen away and not doesn't watch the newer stuff so much. Like he doesn't really keep on top of that. But I definitely have fond memories of watching certain things with him when I was younger, and this is one of them. So I've made a start on it anyway. I remember a couple of years ago I did watch the Halloween episode because we were doing our list of like our favorite Halloween TV episodes, and I didn't realize there was a Star Trek one, and it's the one where they go onto the planet and you've got like the haunted castle and you've got like the witches, and it's a season 2 episode, and you've got like a thing with like a cat, and it's one of these like cheesy 60s thing because it's meant to be a giant cat, but you can literally just tell that it's someone's just done a shot of the cat at like a regular sized cat and just blown it up and made it look like it's big. In the original series again, I'm about 9 episodes in, I think, and on Netflix, it's funny because they start off with the unaired pilot, and in the unaired pilot, Kirk and the crew aren't in it. The only one in it is Spock. He's the only one in the unaired because it's Captain Pike and his crew.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pike.
So I was watching it. I kept expecting Kirk to show up at some point, but
I think there's a newer series either out last year or within the last 2 years that centers around Captain Pike, but I forget the name of that.
Strange New Worlds.
Strange New Worlds. Okay.
Yeah, it's very good. Well, they're 2 seasons in. I think they're planning for 5 seasons, but it's 2 seasons in, and that is definitely the best of the current Trek shows. Because Nurse Chapel, who appears in the original series, they bring back for Strange New Worlds, and they sort of do something with her. But yeah, no, the original series I have a lot of fun with. And I think you have to put it in the context of its time in the 60s because it was, for sci-fi TV, it was really ahead of its time.
Oh, yeah.
The sets and the effects were pretty impressive for a TV show at the time, and just the ideas and themes and some of like the storylines they come up with and the way they play with science. I know like The Enemy Within is one of the early classics, so that's the one where you've got like the evil side of Kirk, so you get like 2 different Kirks, and that's a bit of an early classic. And another thing which I find quite funny is people always underestimate how much fun like Spock and McCoy are together, like their banter. Because a lot of people think of Kirk and Spock, and like I enjoy their relationship. I enjoy that just because they are so different and opposites. But like McCoy and Spock have a really good chemistry and banter as well, which I do enjoy. So it's funny
even
coming back to that.
Even the composition of the crew is fascinating because this being made in the 60s, and for them to have on the deck of the ship Chekhov and Mr. Sulu was kind of huge, because when you consider that this is shortly, not maybe a decade and a half after World War II, and America still has a very strained relationship with Japan, and it was during the Cold War with America's relationship with Russia. For them to envision a future where the Federation has made peace between the U.S. and Japan and Russia, that was a pretty heavy concept.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's a good point. And again, it's all about context, and it's all
Mm-hmm.
about, well, the diversity of Star Trek
Mm-hmm.
and its history of being a very diverse and forward-thinking show, and it
Yeah.
all starts with the original series
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, at this point in American shows, even if you did get like a character of color or an Asian character,
Mm-hmm.
largely they would be like just walking stereotypes,
Mm-hmm.
or just like comedic fodder, or something like that. So
Yes.
once again, it's all about context, and
Mm-hmm.
you've got that brilliant opening theme and one of the great TV openings, I think. So
Oh
it
yeah. It's
just
that operatic score is it's iconic. I'll tell you some. The first convention I ever went to was a Star Trek convention. My
okay.
mother took me to a Star Trek convention because that's how we got to see it. My older brother and myself, because my mother was very much into Star Trek. Still is. Like if you go on my Instagram page, I have a picture of her shelves where she has all this Star Trek memorabilia. She has a
Okay.
drone that's shaped like the Enterprise. She has a Bajoran phaser. She has some Next Generation stuff too. She has like figurines of both Uhura, and then she has a figurine of Geordi. Um, and she told
Very
me
nice.
that as a little girl growing up in the 60s, because she would have been about 10 years old when the series started, that
Hmm.
it blew her mind to see Uhura on the crew and being an officer. And it was one of the things that inspired her to also study science in school. My mother ended up
Uh,
graduating with a degree in forensic science. And part of that is because of seeing Uhura doing on a science fiction show. Like,
yeah.
it's amazing what will inspire people.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. And I think that just highlights the importance of
Mm-hmm.
what these, and I think it works in so many things because we're so used to like male dominated things across
Mm-hmm.
like media and culture, then, you know, inevitably it's never going to be, you know, because if I
Yeah.
see like a male in a role or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, like it's not particularly going to inspire me to go out and be that because I'm so used to it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously in general you have icons and you do have people you look up to,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're male or female, but it's just never going to be the same sort of impact or influence, like, because
Yeah.
it's much more rarer,
Mm-hmm.
especially going back decades.
You can make wonderful things that involve both sexes. It's one of the things that made Star Wars so amazing. The
Mm,
first time you see Princess Leia, she's leaning around the corner shooting a ray gun.
yeah,
like that is so iconic to me. That's why it's amazing when I see newer or younger Star Trek or Star Wars fans trying to insert racist or sexist narratives. It's like, did you watch the same
yeah,
content?
that's what I
What's
was going to
wrong with
say.
you? You're
Yeah,
missing the point.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's so much you can do with a
Yeah.
sci-fi series, and like, yeah, like you said, there's that built-in history there,
Hmm.
so it makes sense.
Dallas.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a nighttime soap opera where the villain is J.R. Ewing and he is evil. He really just
He
lives to
really
just
is.
be evil. Like, geez, like every episode is him trying to do something evil, and half the time it's to its own family. But it's very
Yeah.
fascinating to watch because the series starts in 1978 and it runs
Mm.
through the 80s, and I think it finally I think the last season is maybe in 91 or 92. So I'm looking forward to see where it goes into the 90s. But just to see the
Yeah.
transition from the 70s to the 80s is fascinating because the 70s, it's very much, when it premiered, is very much about this wealthy oil family in Texas. And it's very much everything Texas. They have the Stetson hats and they have a ranch, and it's very, very southern USA, Texas. But as it goes into the 80s, I think they end up having to compete with Miami Vice and also Dynasty. And
Mm.
so you see it transition from just being a very wealthy, Texan family to being a little bit more modern. Not that the wealthy Texan family is not modern, but their style looks a little bit more LA, a little bit more Miami as the years come across. And then you start to see they go from having like very nice cars. They usually have like Mercedes to in the 80s, oh, now it's Porsches, it's Lamborghinis. It's like, I really feel like that was the effect that Miami Vice had on all these other shows to kind of like bump up the glitz and glamour of the series.
Yeah.
They even had shootouts and explosions, and I'm like, this is a nighttime soap. Why are we doing shootouts and explosions? I'm entertained, but I could definitely see the post Miami Vice effect.
Yeah, so maybe there was a bit of a influence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of these people. Really, I come to soaps for the crazy stuff. Like, as wacky as it can get, the better for me, because like, you obviously don't come to these shows for like the realism or like the drama. Like, or I think when they take themselves too seriously is when they sort of fall down, really. But like, because I sort of feel that about the original Melrose Place, because when it first started, it was trying too much to be like the adult 90210, and because of that, those early episodes were pretty boring. But it was when they moved away from that and started sexing it up and doing the more wacky storylines.
And I remember the explosion on there too.
Amazing. Yeah, that's to this day, that is one of my favorite cliffhangers of like any show. So yeah, I do enjoy a bit of Melrose Place. Spoilers, everyone, but you have that twist where the whole season turns out to be a dream.
Yes, I just saw that episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds crazy. That does sound crazy.
Now that one had 2 explosions. It was somebody got blown out of JR's. I think it was JR's office.
Yeah.
Had one explosion. Where was the other explosion? It was a car explosion. Yeah, there was a car explosion, and then there was JR's office explosion.
My next show, it's another Star Trek show, because I've been watching a few of them this month. So this is a first time watch for me, and it's one of the more recent ones, I guess. But I've been watching Enterprise, which is the Scott Bakula one. He's the captain in Enterprise. So I think I'm about 7 or 8 episodes in, and so far I'm very mixed on this one. It's a bit of a weird one, because it started in 2004, and I think you can see that the budget is a bit more than like the older Trek shows. Although I guess Deep Space Nine had a decent budget, but it probably has more of a budget than Deep Space Nine. But yeah, it's a bit of a weird one because of that. Like, there's just certain things about it where it feels like it is trying to be, for the time, a more modern Trek show. Like, it does feel a bit like it's trying, because it's around the time where the modern Battlestar Galactica would have been on. So it does feel a little bit like it's trying to be similar to that. I think it has a very militant feel to it, a little bit, and a little bit American Kana with some of the characters. A little bit, and I'm not sure that quite meshes quite that well with what you think of with Star Trek.
Because Star Trek is usually meant to be a lot more international, because the Federation is supposed to include all of the countries of Earth, because as they go out into space, they're the representative of Earth. And it's funny, when you said Deep Space Nine, I immediately think of the Ferengi.
Yeah.
and his saying, once you get their money, you never give it back.
Yeah.
I don't know why that stuck with me so many years.
And the rules of acquisition. Yeah. Deep Space Nine is a great show. That's definitely one of the best Trek shows. But
and Scott Bakula, that's the gentleman from Quantum Leap, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I was going to say, I think this is the problem, because I know he's not the most popular Star Trek captain. And there's something about Archer, and I'm wondering if it's either that Bakula is miscast, or maybe it's just the writing of the character, because yeah, he's almost too brash and a bit too unlikable and a bit too stern at times. In Quantum Leap, you do sort of love him because he is like this everyman, and there's like this charisma to him, and like he just has this. And I think in Star Trek his character is more unlikable, maybe intentionally, but also they do go for, he is a bit of a farm boy in a way, because he's got like his cute little dog with him on the ship. I'm not quite sure how I feel about a Star Trek captain having his dog with him, but I guess they just wanted to modernize it a little bit again. But like, yeah, so I'm not sure if they've gone for a straight character with him in this, but it's just not working because it's a Star Trek show, and they've made him a little bit more sterner. So, like I said, I'm 7 or 8 episodes in. It's not bad. Like, it's sort of watchable. And I think the barrier is a little bit with the characters. Like, I am finding the characters quite hard to get into. And that's obviously a big part of the Star Trek show, because you have your crew and they're like your core cast. And I think like getting into those characters is a very big part of the show. Like some of the actual stories I'm actually quite liking, and I can see how they do sort of have Trek like themes, and maybe they're just putting that little twist on it. But also with it being a 2004 Trek show, I'm wondering if it'll get more serialized as it goes along, because I think we were at that point by 2004 where TV more and more was getting more serialized. So it's possible then I might feel a bit different to it when those things start to happen. So yeah, I'm a bit mixed on it at the moment. Like, like some episodes I quite like, and I think it is that thing of the characters. Like, I'm not quite being taken in by the characters yet of it, and now thinking about modern Trek, because I know a lot of the hardcore Trek fans don't really like a lot of the modern Trek shows. So
yeah, my mother is not a fan of Picard. She
I mean, I was very mixed on that one,
but she does like the fake Star Trek that's done by the Family Guys at Lower Decks or something.
Oh yeah, and they actually had a crossover episode with Strange New Worlds last season. Yeah, so you had bits of that episode that were in animation, so that was pretty funny.
I did catch an episode of Strange New World. It reminded me of Alien. That particular episode, the creature that they were dealing with, kind of was similar to a xenomorph.
Enterprise, it's a wait and see. I'll keep watching it and see if it grabs me a little bit more. But yeah, it's just funny looking at it at the moment, because even though I think you have to modernize these shows a bit and you have to change them, it's always a fine balance. And it does feel like Star Trek is one of those things where you still need to have a core feel of what Trek has been. You just modernize it a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's always having, as we've moved into newer Trek, it's always having that sort of struggle, I think. Very passionate fan base who have very strong ideas of what a Trek show should be.
My last show kind of goes along with the show I was just previously talking about. And speaking of Melrose Place, because she was also on this show before she was on Melrose Place, Heather Locklear played Crystal Carrington's niece on Dynasty.
Yeah.
And her character is so funny in certain parts. Now, Dynasty, in a lot of ways, can be more ridiculous than Dallas, because so far in Dallas, we have not had a stolen baby, body double, what else? Amnesia, psychosomatic blindness, psychosomatic wheelchair bound. Like Dynasty has done the weirdest and wildest things over the seasons that I've done. I think I'm on season 4 now. It is like, it's pretty wild to be a nighttime soap. And I love seeing the fashions of the 80s. Just said Heather Locklear's character at one point walks down the hallway in a leotard and leg warmers, and she's got a boombox on her shoulder, and she's playing, I think she's playing Thriller on the boombox, and I'm like, this is the most 1984 thing that I have ever seen.
That's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
It's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, no, that does sound fun. I might have to check. So that's one I've never really watched. It does sound very 80s. Like I do think of it as a bit of a 80s TV statement.
Yes, Joan Collins and Diane Carroll plays Dominique. I can't remember Dominique's last name, but yeah, it's got some heavy hitters. And John Forsythe plays Blake Harrington. And watching it on Amazon. Amazon has them for free if you have Amazon Prime.
Time for a rant, because I've been watching Star Trek Discovery, one of the so I've watched this all the way through. We're now on the 5th and final season, and the first season was 2017, so that's when it started, and so a pretty good run, but like, it's a really frustrating up and down show. And this is one of the shows that I think gets the most flack for being not a very modern, a very modern show, but like not a very Trek type show, because, and I know some people blame the J.J. Ambrose films for this, because the feel of Discovery at times is that it's a bit more of a slick, high budget action type show. And yeah, sure, you want a little bit of action in Trek, but it shouldn't really feel like a slick, like blockbuster type.
Yeah, thing. That's what my brother said too. He didn't like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. He was like, this doesn't feel like Star Trek to me. So.
Yeah, well, especially the middle one, I think. But yeah, there's a sense that maybe he started this, and then it's gone on to some of the TV shows at least. But yeah, Discovery's a frustrating show. It's very up and down. Like, I wouldn't say I dislike all of it. There's definitely some characters I like in it, and it's definitely had good sort of storylines and seasons. It got off to a slow start. Like, the first season was pretty dire because it had a Klingon storyline, which I really didn't like. And there was a couple of like really bland characters in that season. And then season 2 got a bit better. Like, that's the season where you had Pike in it, and he actually played the captain that season. Because there's been this theme with like the main character, Michael Burnham, where in a way, she's always been the lead of the show, but she hasn't always been the captain. Like, they've sort of built up to that a little bit, where you've had other captains for like a season. So it was Pike for that season, for season 2. And it's also the season where you had Harry Mudd, who, of course, is another character from the original series, and he was played by the guy Dwight out of The Office. Damn it, what's his name? Yeah, but that actor anyway, and he was really good. It was a shame. It was a shame they didn't bring him back, but then they had a really convoluted storyline in that, like the Red Angel storyline, which fans who have seen the show will know all about. That was a pretty tedious storyline, and you get certain storylines like that where they try and tie certain things into the original show a bit too much, and that felt like one of those. But it did slowly get better. So season 2, as I said, was a bit of a step up, but still hit and miss, but it was better. And then series 3 and 4, I actually did enjoy. They woofed the ending of season 3, so it ended up being a bit frustrating, but I did think it was a better season again. And then Series 4, I thought, was maybe the best season up to that point. So that's why it's so frustrating, because Season 5 has been a bit of a dog of a season to sit through so far. It's been really bad. Like, I think the writing has been really bad and really dull. And once again, you're just getting a lot of like inconsistencies in the character writing. And so, like, there's this character of Captain Rayner, and his whole he's been introduced this season, and his whole thing is that he's a bit of an old school captain. You know, he's a bit of a straight shooter, and he doesn't really do the classic Trek thing. He's not. He's not one who's going to go out of his way to socialize with the crew. He's not going to be open to like ideas from the crew, and that's kind of the setup for the character. And he kind of has his agenda, and then Michael has hers. But they've been told to work. Well, it was Michael's idea to bring him on board because she liked his sort of single-mindedness. But one of the trouble with his characters and with characters like that is they'll do his thing, which is his thing will be like passive aggressive and kind of rubbing up the crew members the wrong way and just not taking any ideas from them and shutting them down. But then you'll have a scene at the end of of an episode where he'll be, okay, I can actually see the value in those people and I want to get on with them and, you know, have a relationship. But then at the start of the next episode, he'll forget all that. And it's just because it's convenient to do it for the plot. They'll just have him revert back to type. And there's a lot of inconsistencies like that with characters. And there's a lot of just not doing things that are that interesting with like the gimmick of the episode. So they sort of did like a time travel episode in the last couple, which has already been featured in the show before. And it almost amounted to, like, there was one or two new things, but in general, it was almost like, well, we've got to go back and change history because otherwise the things we've already saved, they'll be for nothing sort of thing. They'll be wiped out. And it's one of those, rather than actually doing something that's fresh and new with that kind of thing. And I think that particular episode was mostly because it was an excuse to have a little bit of her and Rayner, like Michael and Rayner, and a little bit of development with their relationship. But it's just one of those where you get to the end of the episode and everything is reset. And it just doesn't feel like it's really advanced that much or really changed that much with like the characters. Cheesy and on the nose and just doing stuff like, because you've got these two bounty hunter type characters who are like, at the moment, the main villains of the season. And I don't know, it's like in tonight's episode, in this week's episode, which I'm going to review actually later, but it's like you have this really cheesy backstory with them where it really gets into like their relationship and stuff. And it's just so forced and cheesy. It's like almost like a Romeo and Juliet storyline. And it's like, what are we doing? Like this shouldn't be on the Trek show. So yeah, this season it's been really bad so far. Like, because there's literally in episode 2, there's one of these high action type scenes that I'm talking about. And you've got like 3 characters in the scene and they're kind of chasing after these villains, but you've got like some sort of like a storm or a hurricane. And the way it's shot is it's almost shot like a Mission Impossible scene where you've got these characters. And by the way, they're on these things, these sort of like hover type bikes, which remind me more of Star Wars.
Star Wars, yeah.
Than Star Trek. And it's cutting between them, and they're shouting at each other because they can't hear over like the high wind or something. Mm-hmm. And there's literally a triple shot at one point where you have all three of them in the same shot, but it's like divided on the screen. And it's like, yeah, this is more of like like a Mission Impossible type scene. It's like it was too much. Like that scene was too much for me. I really was getting a headache because having improved like the last couple of seasons, for me anyway, it's like this season is just kind of like shit in the bed. I think it's like it's really bad, but I'm on the last season now, so I sort of have to see it through to the end. And the reviews actually get decent views on YouTube, so I better keep going because they seem to be quite popular.
Kirk had many flings, but they usually were contained to one episode. I do remember Riker having a little bit of a flirtation with I can't remember her name. She was the ship's empath.
Yes,
Troy. But I don't. Troy, yes. Troy, I don't think they ever really solidified their relationship. I think it was more of a flirtation or flirtatiousness between them. But if correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I'm remembering I have not rewatched The Next Generation since the 90s, so I had to reach way back in that memory.
Yeah, and like they do return a little bit to some of that stuff in the current Trek shows, but yeah, there's a time and place for it, and it can be done. Like obviously, I really liked was the Worf one in Deep Space Nine with the Dax. That was one that really did work, and it actually took me off guard because I never really would put those two together. And when it happened, yeah, it was a surprise because I didn't actually think they were going to go through with it like as much as they did, where they do have like a long running relationship. So been watching a BBC sitcom this month. And I know there's a US version of this, but it's called Ghosts.
Oh yeah, I want to see the original. I saw the first 3 episodes of the American version, and I really want to see the BBC version, but I don't think it's streaming anywhere over here.
Yeah.
Let me see.
At some point you should get it, I'm guessing, because if there's a US version. I think we've just finished season 3 because we watched the Christmas special today. But yeah, there's 5 series originally of the UK version. And yeah, in case people don't know what it is, this couple, like, they get left a house in, like, the girlfriend's will. And it turns out their house is inhabited by all these different ghosts.
Good news. It is on HBO Max. We have acquired it on HBO Max if anyone's looking for it.
I am going to recommend it. It's very good. Yeah, so they inherit this house and you've got all these different ghosts. And it turns out the ghosts have been living there for like years and years. And each ghost is different. Like they each have their own set of circumstances because they really play on the fact then they are kind of in the persona of who they were when they were alive. And because you've got all this different like time, so you've got a character called Kitty, who's like a very like timid sort of princess who's like literally from like decades ago. And so she literally is in the mindset. So like she doesn't understand like very basic things. Like she's asking questions about how people like have babies and stuff like that. She doesn't understand anything about Christmas because Christmas happened after she died.
Yeah.
Because she's from that sort of era. And then you get like a Cub Scout, like a guide. He died in the 80s, so he has a very 80s point of view on everything. You have like a Victorian style poet who has like a crush on Alison, who's like the main female in the show, and he's always trying to impress her, come up with ways to impress her. And so you've got like you've got the woman of the house twist in the pilot where which I can sort of reveal, but it, like, because of an accident that nearly kills her, the main female can actually see the ghosts,
yes,
and interacts with them, whereas her husband can't. So it's one of these things. She has a near-death experience, so it means she can see them. And there's actually something quite nice about how they become like her extended family, and like she interacts with all of them and tries to help them understand modern ways. And so it's from the Horrible Histories team. And I think you can really see that, because what it does really well is it does have this really broad sense of humor, where there's some real sort of adult jokes and there's some quite dark jokes at times, but also it does have like a cozy feel to it and a very playful feel as well, where I think you can imagine maybe showing it to like teenagers. Like, it does have quite a broad appeal like that. And I do like then the ghosts are, in a way, just as bigger characters as the humans, like in a way more so. Like, you just spend time with the ghosts and you just see their sort of antics. One of the fun scenes is because you've got a ghost with no head, and that's how he died, so that's what he is. And you've got lots of fun with him trying to find his head where it goes missing, or like he can see it but it's like quite far away, so he has to like maneuver himself down slowly to get to it. And then in the next instance someone knocks it off, and there's a scene in an episode where they've been watching like DVDs, and they discover like DVDs, and they have like a movie night, and they get into like Top Gun, because I think the one who died in the 80s is like, yeah, we should watch like Top Gun. And they recreate the volleyball scene from Top Gun, but they're using like the, yeah, they're using the head as like the volleyball. So you get stuff like that. Kitty is excited to watch Grease. Like, Alison tells her, you'll really like this film. So it's coming up on TV that day. So she puts it on and she leaves the room at one point. And then you've got this character who's like a dead like politician. And he's the one who can actually touch things if he like really focuses. So they have some fun with that. But like, he comes in and he starts changing the channel, and he's like, yeah, there's nothing adult or fun on. And then he just leaves it on like a horror marathon, and it's like Nightmare on Elm Street. And Kitty comes back into the room and she doesn't click that it's not the same film. And she's like, Danny's changed his hair. And then there's this whole thing later on where she's talking to Alison. And she's talking about the movie, and she's saying how she didn't like the guy in it, and Alison saying like, don't worry, like she'll get her man at some point. And it's just one of these mixed wires sort of things where Kitty's frightened because it's like Freddy Krueger coming after people, and then it finally clicks later on when one of the ghosts says, then yeah, it was Nightmare on Elm Street. So she's like, oh, okay, that's where the confusion came. Backstories for the ghosts and how they died. And some of those are quite sad, because the one involving the poet, where he was sort of like double crossed by his cousin or something. So he didn't quite get to be with the woman that he loved, and she didn't know that he loved her. That one's actually quite sad. And one of my favorite things with him is then there's an episode where he overhears a Kylie Minogue song on the radio, I Should Be So Lucky. And it's when he's trying to come up with a poem to impress Alison. And you can see what the joke's going to be, because he's like mouthing the lyrics as he can hear the song. So he comes into her bedroom later and he just starts saying the lyrics to that song. And she's like, I hate to tell you this, but it's actually by an Australian singer, Kylie Minogue. And he's like, oh, tell Miss Minogue I'm so sorry to steal her song, like her sort of lyrics. And he's just like really ashamed, but like him trying to woo Alison is really entertaining. It has fun little twists and turns, because in the one where the poet explains how he dies, like he seems to be misrepresenting the story, and like the other ghosts, because they were there at the time, they're all chipping in and saying, no, that's not how it happened, it happened like this. So there's a lot of fun like that. So
it seems like it would make a great pairing. I mean, I've seen, like I said, a few episodes of the American remake, and what it sounds like they're doing it pretty much the same, like the same eras of ghosts, except for I don't remember a headless ghost, so they might have left that one out. They probably just didn't have the money to do the effect. But I definitely want, like I said, I wanted to see the original British version, just like with the Being Dead. But what the series kind of reminds me of, and I like sitcoms that have a more ridiculous premise, I really enjoy What We Do in the Shadows, which I feel would pair so well with this, especially since those vampires each come from a different era. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think you're right. I didn't think of that, but that is cool. Ghosts is on BBC iPlayer, by the way, if you're in the UK. So I'd recommend checking Ghosts out. So I've also been doing a rewatch of Person of Interest. So I've been watching this with my mum because she really likes the show. Do you know much about Person of Interest?
No, I haven't heard of it.
Okay, so it's a J.J. Ambrose Bad Robot production, and it's sort of very modern feeling. Like it was a bit ahead of the curve, because I think series 1 was about 2011, 2010, something like that. But it's sort of about an evil, well, not exactly an evil AI, but an AI anyway, like a computer that has a mind of its own. And it's invented by a really rich businessman, well, a rich scientist, I should say, Harold, who's played by, damn it, Michael Emerson. Yeah, he plays Harold. So he invented this machine years ago, and the idea behind it is then it can find vulnerable people or people who are potential like perpetrators. It can find them, but using their serial numbers, basically. So the idea is then it seeks out cases which the government sort of consider not to be that important, not to be a priority. So the idea is then they're helping these people, but as like security, they only really have like their social security numbers. So the setup to the show is then it's years later, and he's gone through a certain amount of people because he needs someone to almost be like the muscle who helps him solve these cases. Like he's almost like the brains and the science guy, and he helps with the computer stuff. And because he's a rich guy, he can help with like identities and things like that. So the setup for the show is then it's a very early on, it's a very case of the week style show where you have like them as a pairing and they're like helping people with different cases. But as it goes along, because it's about AI and about technology, it really builds up this mythology to do with the machine and to do with different ideas about modern computers and technologies and hackers and kind of just the possibilities of AI and the inference of it. And you get certain storylines, like long running storylines to do with police corruption, to do with like there's a group called HR, which is like a corrupt like police unit in New York. And it goes into politics as well. It goes into like the influence of this in politics and things like national security and things like that. And you get certain recurring villains as you go along. But the more it goes on, the more diverse and exciting it gets, and the more the big ideas start to come out, where it really becomes quite a high concept, like sci-fi show mixed with like this thriller case of the week style thing. Because at some point in the first season, they introduced this character who's played by Amy Acker, and she is like a computer hacker called Root, and there's a lot of development with her character later on, but initially she is someone who knows the history of this computer, and she wants to take control of it. She almost sees it as like a god type thing, and that's sort of, she wants control of it and to use it for her own like purposes. And that's something which they get into, like the murky side of this, like, because along the way Harold starts to realize, have I made a mistake by letting this thing roam free, sort of thing, letting this thing continue? Like, so it does question the kind of ideas behind this. But yeah, Amy Acker as Root is a really great anti-hero. Like, it's such a fascinating character, and you get other characters who are like part of the regular team. But so at the moment we've just finished series 1, and season 1 has a very good episode to end with, because it's the episode where you see Root for the first time, and it has a really big cliffhanger, one of the really good cliffhangers. But it's like, before that she's only been mentioned briefly, and you sort of saw her in silhouette in one episode, but that's when you first see her. And it's after that then I think the show really takes off, like going into season 2, because season 1 I think is solid, but at times it does feel like a little bit of that just by the numbers case of the week style network show. But it's the more you get into the ideas of the show, like the bigger ideas, and the more you get into like the characters and their dynamic and the various villains, because one of the long-term villains is actually played by the uncle of Christopher and Jonathan Nolan. And Jonathan Nolan is one of the main creators of the show.
What streaming service are you watching it on?
Well, we've got the DVD set, so we're just watching it. I know in the UK it's on Freevee, which is for Amazon.
Oh yeah, we have Freevee here too. Yeah.
So it might be worth checking that, or I'm guessing it'll be on one of them, because it's a network show, and it's funny that it's a network show, because nowadays most of the best shows like that I think are on like HBO or maybe streaming, or like it seems like the days of really great network shows have sort of gone mostly. So this is a bit of a throwback in that sense, because it was on the network. But it's one of those where I think it gets a good balance. So like it works well as like a case of the week style show, but it would be a far more boring show if it just stayed like that. Basically, it's building up the mythology and the characters that really make it a great show. So yeah, once it hits its peak, it's really good, and it's one of those that sticks the landing as well. It has a pretty satisfying final episode. The first season of that show, Shining Vale.
Yes, I heard of that one.
Yeah, and that's one I went into not knowing what to expect, because it's another supernatural one, which seems to be a theme this month. But supernatural black comedy, like this family move into a new house, and there's certain secrets to do with the house, and I think it definitely plays it where it could be supernatural or it could just be in the character's head. And
that's the one where the mother's a writer and she's trying to write in the attic. I think she set up her typewriter or something in the attic.
Yeah, and she keeps having interactions with this ghost, and I don't really want to say too much because I guess it's spoilers, but they do some really fun stuff with like the ghosts and like the relationship with the Courtney Cox character, and when she's trying to write this novel and the ghost almost is helping her out, and you get more into the backstory of what happened in that house. And yeah, it was one of those. I didn't know what to expect. And when I saw the thumbnail and when I saw then it was just like, because I think it's like Lionsgate, their streaming service. And yeah, I just thought it looked a little bit soapy. So I was expecting it to be like that. And when I started watching it, it really wasn't like that at all. It was very kind of, as I said, very sort of black sort of humor, a lot of hijinks. There's some funny dialogue, some cringe sort of jokes, and obviously this supernatural element as well, where there are some freaky moments. But the family have quite a nice dynamic, and you've got Greg Kinnear as the other main lead, so he's the husband, and he's the one who has to go out to work and has a regular job, and they go to therapy as well because they're having issues, and they make for such a fun couple. They have really good chemistry, and there's just some hilarious lines of dialogue that just take you off guard, because one of the lines I like from him is when they're in like a therapy session and she's been getting jealous of one of his co-workers who she thinks he might have a thing for. And at one point he says, "She's not some piece of ass, she's your age." And there's just this long pause and she's like, "Yeah, let that hang there for a while, what he just said." So there's great, and there's a scene where he like literally quits, like he's drunken in a bar and he really hates his job and his boss, so he's considering quitting, and they do that whole gag of like he's doing a speech of what he's going to tell the boss, and it's him just ranting at the boss and swearing, and of course
the boss walks in.
Well, not exactly that, because I think he's already met the boss in the bar, but like the joke is, and he's just telling it to the bartender, like you cut to the bartender. But then later on he does quit and it sort of goes viral. And he's saying things like something like, "Why don't you it's some sort of rude expression like, "Why don't you go suck a dick," or something like that. And Greg Kinnear swearing is just so entertaining.
Oh yeah, because you can't, because it's against type. You don't picture him doing that.
Surprise! Like it's one I went into not really having much expectations, and I've ended up really enjoying it. The first season, anyway, and you've got a good cast because Mira Sorvino's in it as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, you don't see her in much nowadays. So that's, and Cheryl Lynn Finn as well out of Twin Peaks. Yeah. She has a small role, and
I haven't seen her since I think she was in Wish Upon. She had a small role in Wish Upon.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, she was in that. So it's always good seeing her. So yeah, it's a pretty good cast. You get some good guest star. So yeah, I'm going to check out season 2 soon because I've finished season 1. But yeah, that's Shining Vale, which, yeah, it just depends where you are. In the UK, you can sort of get it on Prime because I think they do a lot of streaming services on there, so you can just sign up through Prime to get more Courtney Cox as well.
I like her.
She's always good. Yeah. So yeah, that's the end then. That's the end of our viewing for the month. So I hope you guys had some good suggestions there, and you can let us know what you've been watching.
Definitely.
Like and subscribe as always. Share us out. And I'm going to give Lady Shasha a few minutes to promote her stuff.
Oh, thank you. Of course, my channel is called What Did I Just Watch? And I do reviews of horror, thriller, sci-fi, and sometimes some other things, but mostly those things. Maybe dark fantasy. I get into that a little bit too. Also on Monday nights, I'm on Hood Podcast, where we talk about news of the weird and react to some funny TikTok videos. And currently, I am helping award-winning horror author Crystal Connor promote the Cabin in the Woods Film Festival, which is a very, very hybrid and I would say unique festival in that there's 3 parts to it. There is the actual cabin experience, where you actually stay at a cabin in the woods in the Pacific Northwest of the United States and view some of the scariest movies that you'll ever see. All independent films. The second part of that is the in-theater experience. Say you're not a campy type person, you don't want to go out to the cabin. Well, you can go to downtown Seattle, and for 2 days there is the Cabin in the Woods Film Festival. And then say you can't make it. These are hard times, we know. There's also an online component that's called Cabin on the Web. Now, the cool thing about the online component is it's very interactive. As you're watching the films,
motion detected at the front door.
Sorry about that.
Nice.
As you're watching the films, you can comment live, and there is a community message board that pops up that you'll be able to see what your comments and everyone else that's watching the film at the same time. There's also online games in between the different movie blocks, which the movies are grouped by theme. In between the movie blocks, there are games where you can receive prizes, from free theater tickets to gift cards, and there's even a virtual escape room. And it's hosted by various people within the horror film community. If you want to see the specifics on who's hosting the games and who our special guests are, you can go to cabininthewoodsfilmfestival.com. But I will let you know that our special guests are directors, writers, actors, people that when can you sit here and watch independent horror films with directors and be able to engage and talk to them about the films that you're watching? It's not an everyday thing. So I just really love this festival, and I want to promote it as best I can.
Okay. Very good. Yeah. Thank you for that. And we will have Lady Shasha on again in the future, and be sure to go and subscribe to her YouTube channel and follow her online. I will post it in the description to this video as well. And yeah, thanks guys. Take care of yourself. You can also support me, patreon.com/borednow for just $1 a month for a little bit of extra content. But thanks for listening, guys. We will see you again soon. Goodbye.